You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 103 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I'm excited to share a recording I did with my friend Chip. Almost a year ago, Chip was gracious enough to have his first step recorded for the podcast at the noon Zoom meeting. In order for everyone to feel safe recording during a meeting, we had a group conscience for specific guidelines as to just what I could record for the podcast. A few weeks ago, Chip was giving an Experience, Strength, and Hope share at our meeting, corresponding to a year of sobriety from porn and masturbation, and he expressed interest in having this recorded for the podcast as well. Since it fell outside the guidelines of recording first steps at the meeting, we decided to set up a Zoom meeting to record on another night. Perhaps at a future business meeting, we may ask for the ability to record Experience, Strength, and Hope shares at our Zoom meeting in addition to first steps and let the group decide. Anyway, we had a great conversation before and after Chip's written share. Among the things we talked about were the importance of program calls and taking things one day at a time. I found a few readings about these in the booklet called Tools of Recovery, and this comes from the section Using the Telephone. Carrying a list of phone numbers with us is beneficial because we never know when we will face a challenging situation. Sometimes we need to call people to help start our day. At other times, we may need to check in about current thoughts and behaviors. Some suggest calling 3 people every day in order to build and maintain a support system. The practice of making phone calls even when you don't have any particular reason will make it easier when you need support. If you're having a difficult day, consider using the phone to do service. Reach out to others who are newer in SAA or who are having a hard time. It can do wonders for your mood and your sobriety. And the section on one day at a time. Recovery from sex addiction rarely happens overnight. It takes patience, a quality often in short supply for us. Imagining that we have to find the courage to face abstinence from sexual behaviors for indefinite amounts of time can feel overwhelming. Often at the end of acting out sexually, we said to ourselves, "I'll never do that again." It's not that we weren't sincere, it's just that it rarely turned out that way. We always seem to go back for more. In recovery, we avoid making grand pronouncements about quitting forever. Instead, we do it just for today, no matter how tempted we are. We don't act out today. We find this approach to be more workable. By looking only at the day in front of us, with the help of others and our higher power, the challenge of recovery becomes more manageable. In particularly challenging moments, committing to our sobriety for just an hour at a time is what we may need to do in order to not give in to our impulses. It is sometimes said that the person who has the longest abstinence is the one who woke up earliest that day. I may have read these on a previous episode, but I thought that it matched perfectly for those topics on this episode. Before sharing the conversation, I did want to mention that the first 5 minutes were actually from the pre-recording just after we jumped on Zoom, but I thought it would be fun to include here. We had talk of the Harleys near my house and the interruptions that it caused while trying to record. We also talked about football, and I will say if you're a Cowboys fan, my apologies in advance. We just had a little fun as 49er fans. And during the recording, before we actually got to Chip's written Experience, Strength, and Hope share, we had a wonderful discussion on his 3 circles, which led to a lot of talk of travel and Chip's adventures earlier in the year. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Chip. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, the other day when I was recording the outro for episode 100 or 101, I live next to a Harley dealership, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and a bunch of people.
No way.
Yeah. Oh my God. There was just like 5 minutes where it was just nonstop. Just everyone going down the street.
Well,
and
look at the bright side. Most of those guys are probably in South Dakota this week.
yeah, true. But yeah, my wife was upstairs. And she's like, "Oh God, I'm sure Jason's trying to record right now." And yeah, it's just like every time I would have a thought and get ready to go, have to stop and wait for everything to go by. The filter that I have doesn't pull out all of that noise, so I can pull out fan noise or the air conditioner noise, but not the motorcycles.
I just want you to see what I'm wearing in your honor.
Oh, nice.
Actually, I'm a diehard Niners fan.
Awesome.
Have been my whole life. My mom's from San Francisco. Growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, we didn't have the Titans. The closest team with us was New Orleans Saints or the St. Louis Cardinals. You didn't really want to cheer for either of them. So I chose my mom's hometown for my team.
Nice.
And that was back when they had John Brody, Gene Washington, Ted Kwolek, all those guys. And my two favorite teams now are the 49ers and whoever's playing those fucking Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. As being a Niners fan, there's always been the rivalry of waiting for Dallas to lose. So,
well, I mean, I've hated them since 71 when they threw those 2 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes.
Oh, geez.
I hold grudges. I do not get on my bad side.
Yeah.
Just hate it.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just thinking of the 49ers. I used to live in Saratoga, which is an adjacent town to San Jose, and pretty close to where Steve Young lived. And I was able to drive through the neighborhoods, and a couple of my friends who were Mormon knew exactly where his house was and stuff. And it's like, oh, there's Steve Young's house. Yeah. And lastly, is there anything that you wanted to cover after you're done sharing?
Well, I can't actually be kind of funny to go over what happened afterwards.
Okay.
Not funny. I don't know if that's the right term, but my wife was at the Bethesda workshop for sex addicts, partners of sex addicts, the days leading up to the anniversary day. She came home that night of the 29th, and I got a beautiful little bracelet here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's an eternal knot. She gave me, and so I would remember to love myself and to love her, which I like. I wear it all the time now. But the next day, she told me what she had learned at Bethesda, one of which was that when we listened to my first step together from your podcast, that doesn't count as a disclosure anymore. I have to do another one with therapist and everything else. And I'm like, okay, but you do understand that when I do my next disclosure with you, it'll just be for the time that we've been together. The first step you heard was far more inclusive than what my disclosure will be. She goes, I don't know. They just told me it didn't count. And I go, have they heard my first step? She goes, no. I'm like, okay, well, I'm now paying thousands of dollars for 2 therapists to work with us on a disclosure that she's already heard.
Oh, geez.
And that was not the way I wanted to spend my first full day with my wife after my anniversary.
Yeah.
But look, I traumatized her. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help rebuild the trust that I threw away. It's my fault we're going through this, not hers for asking for it.
Yeah.
So, yes, I would have preferred not to hear it on that day, but I understand that she wants it, and I will do it. So, trying to be healthy about this.
Yeah, exactly. So we do have Chip here on the podcast, and like we were mentioning here, that his first appearance on the podcast was episode number 69, where you did your first step. And we
It's
talked about it.
memorable. What can I say?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on episode 100. Number one, the number of the episode. I remember after recording your episode, if you were comfortable with that number, as I can make that a short episode of just me on my own, rather than having that as your first step. And I recall you saying that it was okay. But yeah, secondarily, we talked about the hassle that it took to get that first step recorded. And now we have an established rule in the Noon Zoom room that makes it logistically easy to record first steps. And we have a set of guidelines. But one of the things that you wanted to do on the anniversary of you being in program was to give an experience, strength, and hope talk. And we thought about recording that in the meeting, but it fell outside of the boundaries of what we had agreed for recording first steps. And not wanting to re-traumatize the group, we thought that it would be a lot easier just to do this on our own. So anyway,
Yeah.
welcome to the podcast again, Chip.
Thank you. Third time's a charm, I guess.
Awesome. And so what we're planning on doing is having Chip read exactly what he read to our group as his experience, strength, and hope share. But before getting to that, I was wondering if you would care to share what's in your inner, middle, and outer circles.
Well, my inner circles that I first established when I came back from the Bethesda workshops back in August of 22 was pornography and masturbation, because those were my core problems. I could never look at pornography again, can never masturbate alone again.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have masturbation in all three of your circles. For me right now, it's safer in one. I hope to at some point later in life, maybe, make it all three or at least two of them. But right now, for me, it's best to keep it where it is.
Yeah.
And I added about 3 months into the program, lying to my wife. Now, people have laughed when I've told them why I added it, because it's not the usual reason, which people would say, trying to misdirect blame or anything like that. I am old. I'm 62, playing pickleball. And, actually, I'm 61, will be 62 very shortly. And I fell when I played pickleball. And my wife had made me promise that I would not dive for balls in pickleball because I'm too old and I'll get hurt. Mm-hmm. And I came back and she goes, "Did you get hurt?" And I said, "No." Because, I dove for a ball. I scraped my knee up, but nothing serious. It's like a little raspberry, Mm-hmm. 3 days later, she saw the raspberry, which had now kind of scabbed up a bit. And I could just see in her eyes. She goes, "You lied to me." And I was like, "Oh, not really, because I don't consider this getting hurt. I had been in a cast prior to this from playing pickleball. Mm-hmm. This is nothing." But I, you could see in her mind, I could see it going, he's lying about that already. When's the next big lie coming?
Yeah.
So once I thought it through, I walked out in the den and said, "Okay, I'm changing my inner circles." Did not realize that would traumatize her. The whole hearing that I'm changing my inner circle, she, of course, went to the wrong place, as any traumatized woman would do. I said, no, you're going to like this. I'm adding not lying to you in my inner circles. If I ever lie to my wife again, I have to reset my sobriety date. So, and that's been really good for her healing and mine. Is I can't do it, just can't. And I don't always say the most pleasant things, but I have to say the truth.
Yeah. Very important.
So, and then my middle circles are anything that helps me slide into my inner circles. So no hard rated R movies. And I used to say, no gratuitous nudity. I'm learning that now that I've eliminated gratuitous nudity, almost any nudity can trigger me. Mm-hmm. And worse, I found out any nudity triggers my wife.
Yeah.
Because she gets worried about it. So I don't get to see Oppenheimer yet. And really dying to see the movie for the historical aspect of it. And then they told me there was nudity. And I'm like, well, I really don't want to even put that image in my mind of Robin Oppenheimer naked. But apparently it's important to the story. So anyway, I don't know when we'll get around to it, but I'm going to wear her down on that, I hope, so I can watch that movie.
Yeah. How about your outer circle?
Well, I'm glad you asked. When I started this back in August, I guess, early August 3rd through 6th, I was at the Bethesda workshop, and that's where we first put my circles together. And I literally couldn't think of anything to put in my outer circle. I had been in such denial about my addiction that when they go, "What do you do for fun?" all I could think of is my addiction. That's when it really struck home of how bad had become addicted and how blind I was to my addiction. That's what another time that during those 4 days that I broke into tears when I couldn't think of anything. And then I realized there are things that pickleball, by the way, that's in there. Guitar, which you'll appreciate.
Nice.
Although I play more blues than yours. We have different styles, but I play acoustic guitar in a band now. Never played in a band before my addiction. Kind of funny, but I got invited into one afterwards. I got watching documentaries, and my really sinful addiction is reality TV. My wife and I we are watching Big Brother right now. In fact, I had to pause it to come out here to do this. And then we have been rewatching reruns of Survivor. It's a bad problem. We're probably going to have to get therapy on this. But we just like those shows and movies. Going to movies, I really enjoy because it's the big screen, but it's got to be the right movie. Not a lot of movies on my big TV at home, it's fine, but there's certain movies you have to experience in the cinema with the huge screen. And going to museums is high on me, and we're going to Amsterdam next year.
Nice.
And so I'm looking forward to touring the museums before we take a cruise down the Rhine for my stepdaughter's graduation gift, I can't wait for that. Travel in general is one of my outer circle activities. There's a bunch of other things I like reading. I actually enjoy my job, which sounds weird, but I have one of the few jobs that I get to go home at the end of the day and say, I made a difference in somebody's life today. And there aren't many jobs like that. And so it gives me a feeling of purpose, which I enjoy. So people ask me when I'll retire, I go, I don't know if I will. I'd like to be one of those guys that dies at his desk with a smile on his face.
Nice.
So,
yeah. Just thinking about your travel this past year, I've really enjoyed the backgrounds that you've had at the noon meeting and changing that up. And you went to Budapest and a couple other places.
We took a cruise down the Danube, just my wife and I. We've had, as you can imagine, I've had a very stressful year. And so my wife and I took a cruise. But if you do a river cruise, it's not like ocean cruises. There's 180 people on the boat, tourists. That's it.
Oh, wow.
You have set times to eat. It's not 24-hour buffet. And they make excellent food on the Viking.
Nice.
And we started in a town. Well, I flew to Munich a day before we were supposed to get on the boat. And my wife and I happened to be June 6th, which is D-Day. And we went to see Dachau, which is not very far from downtown Munich. I think it was a 10-minute drive. And being there on D-Day and seeing that place was so emotional. It's just very difficult to describe. And then we went downtown Munich and saw all that. We did not hit a beer garden because we're not drinkers. So I regretted not doing it just for the experience, but we were exhausted. We'd flown all across the ocean and then spent a whole day walking around death camps. So that was tiresome. And then the next day we boarded the boat in a town called Passau, which I had never heard of, but it's a beautiful city where 3 rivers converge and really fascinating history. It was the capital of Bavaria for a while. For a long while. I didn't realize Germany didn't exist till like 150 years ago. I never realized that. So it was a fascinating history lesson, and I'm big into history. The second day we were there, we went to a town called Linz in Austria, which was a very big manufacturing town in World War II. So it got leveled. Not a lot of history there. The Americans bombed the hell out of it to kill Germany's military might, but we took a afternoon trip to Český Krumlov in the Czech Republic. For me, the first time I'd ever gone over to behind a former Iron Curtain country, and you really get that feeling as you're driving and there's like a mile long stretch of road, or not road, but I mean the fields on either side for a mile, no building, nothing. I was like, why is this area not developed at all? He goes, well, this is where the fence was, and we're not sure they've got all the mines up yet.
Oh, geez.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like, whoa, this is reality all of a sudden. And we enter Czech, you leave Austria, beautiful modern country, and you go into Czech Republic, right there on the border. It is decrepit. You could see the difference between what happened under communism versus capitalism so clearly. And we went to a beautiful town, Český Krumlov, where we walked in under this 3-story bridge that had 2 stories of apartments on top of it. And our guide of the day said, oh, yeah, this is the new renovation. This is not original. This was done in the last renovation back in 1400.
Wow.
I was like, oh, that's the new renovation. Okay.
Yeah.
And the town it's literally like going on a Disney set of what a medieval town would be like. That's what it's like. And it was fascinating. The food was delicious and very fattening. And I love that. And we had a great time there. Went back, spent the evening in Linz. And Linz, the reason we took this cruise was because my wife's mother was born in Linz.
Yeah. I remember you talking about that.
Yeah. And so this was the first time anybody in her family had gone back to see where she was born. And her father had been in a concentration camp, escaped, bartered his way across the country selling cigarettes, got to his family. They escaped to the U.S., had a very harrowing story there where they were kidnapped at Ellis Island by a guy claiming to be their sponsor who wasn't. They were supposed to go to Maryland. They ended up in Pennsylvania, but it all worked out and they're happy here now.
Nice. Yeah.
And then we went to a few other cities like Vienna, Budapest, small little towns you may not have heard of. Saw more churches in this trip than I've been in my last 50 years of my life.
Wow.
But it was just an amazing cultural experience. And if anyone ever has a chance to take one of those river cruises, you should.
Awesome. So the purpose of recording tonight, like I mentioned, you did an Experience Strength and Hope share on the anniversary of you being in program. I would love to hear that right now, if you are comfortable.
Well, I will clarify one thing.
Yeah.
It was an anniversary of my sobriety.
Sobriety, okay.
And it's important to note that's a difference than when I got in the program.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier before recording about the date that it was written into the text that you're going to be reading versus it's in August now. So
right. The first time I wrote it was the day I counted as my anniversary date. And you'll understand when I start the speech. But
yeah,
if y'all are ready, here I'll go.
Yeah, go for it.
On July 28th, 2022, I looked at porn and masturbated. That was a year and a day ago. I have not looked at pornography or masturbated since. 1 full year of sobriety from 2 of the 3 inner circle activities I must abstain from to remain sober. I added lying to my wife a few months after I stopped acting out, and so I'm not a year sober from all of my inner circle activities, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I know this is a big accomplishment, and I don't want to imply I'm belittling it, but just saying that the last time I acted out was a year ago isn't the same as facing the fact that I was and am a sex addict. That took me a while longer. My journey to today started out like so many bad thoughts I've had, with me convinced I wasn't a sex addict. My wife had told me back in June of 2022 that she thought I was a sex addict, and if I didn't go to a clinic to get treatment, that she would reconsider her commitment to my marriage. I had gone to an adult bookstore to act out watching videos that day. She confronted me, and naturally I denied it. She saw through the lie and she wouldn't let it drop. After what seemed like hours, I finally agreed that I had a problem and I would attend the Bethesda workshop for sex addicts. 3 days later, I told her I really wasn't an addict and I only agreed to get her off my back. I immediately saw the pain in her eyes. I had hurt her once again. Incredibly, although it was not my best moment, that was still not my low point. That wasn't going to come for a month or so more. I remember I went into our bedroom, took a minute to think it over, and came back out and told her I would attend the next session at Bethesda. That would be August 3rd through the 6th. 4 days of intensive therapy with 29 other adult men who identified as sex addicts. There would be no access to computers, phones, TVs, not even my Apple Watch. I went in convinced I wouldn't be there for long. I wasn't one of those sickos who went around flashing people on the street or getting off watching girls on a swing. I wasn't even a serial cheater. I like porn is all. Men are visual animals. We look for certain attributes to find mates. What I was doing was normal. It was my wife who had body issues, not me. I'd assumed they'd hear my story and send me home. That's how tall my wall of delusion was. I was unable to see how my addiction was affecting my life and those around me. I won't say the seminar wasn't hard, but it was needed to break down that delusion of sobriety and actually see myself as the addict I had become. I had decided to show them I was in control by stopping looking at porn before I arrived, hence the July 29th sobriety date. It didn't take long at Bethesda for the delusion to be broken. That was my low point. Once I was released, for lack of a better term, I immediately called my wife to see if she would be home when I returned. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I had lost all the confidence in myself when my addiction was exposed. My wife told me she was waiting for me, and she was surprised I had stayed the entire time. She told me she loved me and how proud she was of me for doing the program. Then she said the words that haunted me for a long time. I assumed you would check out after the first day, if you even checked in to begin with. That was how badly my addiction had affected my wife. My biggest supporter had lost faith in me to do anything about my addiction. Not only because I couldn't see my addiction, but she was convinced I wasn't going to do anything about it even after it was exposed. She was trying to cheer me up, but all I could see was that I was still the failure and embarrassment I'd always been. I was once again the child who was his father's biggest disappointment. I was the teen who was sent away from home and family. I was the failure. I returned home a changed man. I was no longer confident of anything I had previously believed about myself. I had built up large walls between my reality and my addiction, so high I hadn't been able to see the addiction in my life. When they took down the walls at Bethesda, I was left without any protection from the reality that was my life. All I knew was that I had to work the program we had established at Bethesda. It wasn't that difficult after all. I had agreed to do a program at Bethesda to attend 2 to 3 meetings a week with a 12-step program. They encouraged me to do 90 meetings in 90 days, but I said I was too busy to commit that much time. I know it sounds silly to hear that, but I was still in a bit of a denial about how really addicted I was, and I had no idea how important these meetings would become to my recovery. The first meeting I attended was on a Sunday night because I spent most of Saturday night and Sunday just processing what I had learned about myself. I went to an SA website and found a meeting locally at a very large church. I remember parking in the shadows around the side of the church and creeping through the bushes so no one would see me. After all, I knew a lot of people who attended this church. Luckily, no one did, or I probably wouldn't have ever gotten here. I probably would have blown off 12-step meetings entirely, and who knows what I would be now if I had. I went to the weekly meeting for 2 months, but I didn't like the group. I didn't feel like I could relate to the people in the room. One guy was always saying he was sober for 2 days at the meeting. Another guy looked like a biker with wild eyes and tattoos who never said a word while in the meeting. These people had addiction issues very different from mine. I felt uncomfortable every time I attended that meeting. The leader, however, I could relate to. He was my age, and we had the same problem with porn addiction. While talking to him, I found out he played guitar as well. I asked him to be my sponsor, and he said yes. Since I had promised to do 2 meetings a week, I had to attend a Zoom meeting, and the first one I chose was called the Charleston Group. I didn't know anyone in Charleston, so I figured it would be safe. I didn't really know about Zoom rooms connect people all over the country and the world. I wonder if I would have signed on if I had realized how wide the scope of people is using Zoom. I guess that being old actually helped me for a change because I had no idea how prevalent Zoom meetings were at the time. I liked the meeting, even though I didn't share, but I decided to try the Zoom meetings again since I could always drop off if I wanted. I remember I was thinking I only committed to doing 2 meetings a week. Somehow I'd already dropped the idea of doing 3 meetings and was just justifying doing 2. I wonder how many other brothers have caught themselves doing the same thing. So the following Wednesday, I was in the noon Zoom meeting. I decided I wasn't going to share, but when we went into the breakout rooms, we had dead time near the end. No one raised their hands. It was just silence. So I raised my hand. It was hard. I felt my voice cracking as I said I was an addict. The first time I had said that to anyone other than my wife, and I explained how I got there. I was the last person to share. Immediately after sharing, I was taken back to the main room. Not knowing I was entering the main room on mute, I clicked the button to mute myself after sharing. This accidentally unmuted me. I don't believe anyone took the burning desire section, so the group immediately went into the closing part of the meeting. I remember someone talking about a phone list, and I wondered if I should reach out to them. And the next thing I remember was the reading of the promises. I had never heard them before. Now, remember, I thought I was muted, so they started reading them. I felt confident to say things out loud about how ridiculous they sounded. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. And I thought to myself, how would you know you're halfway through if this is something I'm going to do the rest of my life? We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. I remember saying, yeah, like that's going to happen or something. I don't remember if I said it out loud or not, but I think I did. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I'd heard enough. I said out loud to the screen, like that is going to happen. Then I heard someone say, Chip, you aren't muted. I was horrified. I nearly dropped off the meeting, but somehow something made me stay. After the readings ended, someone said, Chip, stick around for fellowship. I don't know why, but I did. We started talking, and I told them, the people there, that I felt like they were drinking Kool-Aid, as if they thought these promises were going to come true for me. They asked me to give it a go for 6 months and see if I changed my mind. I don't know why, but I agreed to that commitment. I didn't think I would, of course. I was too busy to do meetings for 90 days, much less 6 months after all. I was just saying yes to let the fellowship move on to the next person. Then I actually believed I would give the program 6 months. I was still looking for that magic pill that would cure me so I could go back to real life. But I knew I didn't want to be the person I was anymore. Maybe these meetings could help me become the person I always pretended to be. Maybe the promises weren't just people drinking Kool-Aid. Maybe, and I know the 12 steps had worked for many years for alcoholics, maybe it could work with me too. I mean, it hadn't really been that bad in meetings after all. I could handle this with ease. The next month was miserable. I wasn't prepared for the withdrawals. They were terrible. I had dreams of acting out. I was triggered by a door closing the first time I was left alone at home. I was suicidal, thinking I couldn't stop acting out, and I couldn't go back to the way I had been. My head was spinning half the time, and when it wasn't, I was consumed with guilt over what I had done. Suicide truly felt like the best answer to all my pain. I was starting to turn more and more to the Zoom meetings to handle my emotions. If I could get on a Zoom call, I could be sober. I tried to be as honest and open as I could about my depression and feelings of worthlessness. Yet I still hadn't gotten the courage to make a phone call to an SAA member. I had my small group of brothers from my Bethesda group, but we lived apart, and I could already feel some of them slipping out of the program. I finally did reach out to someone in SAA after a particularly difficult trigger. I wanted to act out, but I also wanted to be sober. We talked for about 30 minutes. He calmed me down, and he helped me get my head on straight. After a few weeks, I was regularly attending 2 meetings a day because they met when I would usually act out. There were slower periods at work, and I could always hit up a porn site on my personal computer or phone. Now, instead of acting out, I was attending meetings. The phone calls got easier. I was surprised at how easy it was to talk to people about what I was going through. I decided I wanted to give my first step to the Zoom room. More than that, I wanted it recorded on the Sex Addicts Recovery podcast so others could hear my pain and my depression and learn from my mistakes. I wanted to shine a light so bright on my addiction that it would kill all the fungus and mold I had hidden behind my walls of denial for so long. After I gave my first step, I was overwhelmed by the show of support and how many people who clearly had their heads on straight, could relate to what I was talking about. For the first time, I didn't feel like some gross creature. My addict, however, had heard enough. Suddenly, my mind was filled with thoughts like, these people don't know me. If they knew how low I had gone, they wouldn't be saying these things. And even though I had just admitted to all my misdeeds, the addict was insistent. I got depressed. The suicidal thoughts came back. I didn't deserve these kind words. I didn't deserve anything good to ever happen to me again. I wasn't back at my lowest point, but I could see where it was. Then a strange thing happened. Someone called me. They were asking me to help them with their desire to act out. We talked for a while. I don't remember what I said, but he told me I'd helped him not act out. I remember thinking after I hung up, that guy must really be bad off if I could help him. I was still putting myself down, still feeling unworthy of anything good happening and discounting, if not outright dismissing, that I could ever see myself as a good person again. But that call wasn't the last. I talked to some brothers about it, and they helped me get stronger. I started gaining some confidence in my recovery, although I still had the sex dreams and the daily triggering episodes. And while the depression and suicide thoughts were still there, now I had a plan on how to handle them. I started out with a daily pledge. I won't bore you with my reasons for staying sober. They are my personal reasons, after all. The important thing isn't what I say anyway. The importance of my daily pledge is that it helps me focus on today. Today, I am staying sober. Just today. I'm not staying sober for 1 year or 1 month. I'm only pledging to be sober today. I can do anything for just one day. I was regularly sharing in both rooms I attended daily by this time. After a slow start, I was killing the 90 meetings in 90 days. After 3 months, I'd attended 157 meetings. I hadn't acted out despite the horrible withdrawals, the dreams, the triggering events, and the depression. Then I realized, the dreams had nearly completely stopped, and the triggers didn't hold such a compulsion on me anymore. I started to believe that I had locked the addict away and I was going to win. Then came the countdown to 100 days. I don't know why, since I'd never really worried about dates coming up before, but there was something about reaching 100 days. I started to realize I was heading toward 100 days without pornography, 100 days without masturbating, 100 days without checking out every woman I saw and thinking about her sexually. It started to seem like too long. I started doubting if I could make it. The idea of staying sober from now on seemed too hard, too daunting, too unfair. My addict that I thought I had locked away had gotten out, and he was reminding me of everything I'd given up and how much I liked it. No, wanted those things. It's not fair, my addict said. Men are visual creatures. You aren't hurting anyone by looking. If my wife has a problem, it's her problem with her body, not mine. Luckily, I realized almost too late what was happening. I called my sponsor and a bunch of other brothers in the program, and they talked me off the ledge. They reminded me of my pledge, just one day, not 100 days, not 1,000 days, but just today. I can do anything for one day. I made it past that crisis point, and I learned a valuable lesson. I can never lock away my addict. I have to keep him in sight. I have to know what he is doing all the time. I used to have the addict in the passenger seat of my life, telling me where I could go to feel better and have fun. He's still in the car, but now he's in the back seat. He still tells me about the good times I'm missing, pointing out attractive women, where an adult bookstore is, etc. But now I had my higher power in the passenger seat. He has the GPS, and I know if I listen to him, I will get to where I want to be in the most direct and least painful way. Not always the most fun way, but the best way, just the same. I started hosting meetings. I was actually giving back to the group, and that felt great. I was focusing not so much on my recovery, but the process of recovery. I was getting phone calls daily from brothers telling me how much they liked my shares and asking if I was available to sponsor. I had to turn them down because I hadn't gotten very far in the steps. I struggled a long time with the second and third steps. I had fired my first sponsor who wasn't pushing me and started back at step one with a new sponsor. And I just didn't believe I was ready to sponsor others yet. The more people I asked, the more determined I became to reach that stage where I could be a sponsor. My new sponsor was perfect for me. He was a former military man, and he set the goals I needed to accomplish. I had to work the steps or he would fire me. I've always been an overachiever, probably because my parents always told me I wasn't good enough. So this type of challenge is what I needed. Now that people were asking me to sponsor them, I was motivated to finish the steps also. I finished step 4, not so easy, and but I breezed through the rest in about 6 weeks. I remember the day I told this room I could take on sponsees. Within 2 hours, I had 8 people reach out to me. I didn't feel I could handle that many people at once, so I decided on just 2. That was a major day for me because it was the day I'd finished 5 months in recovery, finished my 12 steps, and gotten 2 sponsees. I was feeling great. Then the unthinkable happened. Everything was going well in recovery, but not everything in my life. I had decided to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas without my extended family, as I was unsure of how I would feel in a large group of people. What I didn't anticipate was my mother's reaction to my decision. She decided that the decision not to attend was not mine, but caused by my wife not wanting to be around them because they were loud and fun. By March, my mother had worked it up her mind that my wife was a, quote, fucking lying bitch who was no longer welcome in her home. I tried to convince her of the reality of the situation, but she didn't want to hear it. I finally said, if you won't welcome my wife in my home, you're telling me that I'm not welcome in your home either, because I'm not going to go where my wife can't go. I turned to my sisters and asked them for help, but discovered very quickly they were on board with my mom's position. Then a strange comment was made. My mother had tried to calm herself, but she made matters worse by saying she didn't have anything in common with my wife. I would assume that loving me was something they both had in common, but apparently they did not. Then my mother told me I need to stop thinking with my penis and use my head. It was completely out of context as we weren't discussing anything at that moment, and I started to wonder why she said that. No one in my family even knew of the issues I was dealing with. Then I remembered one person did know. I had reached out to the only other person in my family who knew. He was also in recovery and a part of a 12-step group. My nephew, who I had told not to share my secret with anyone, but especially not his mother, who I couldn't trust to keep secrets, had told her I was a sex addict. My addiction was out. Then all the attitudes became obvious. My family turned their back on me. I can only assume the attack on my wife was the cover story for their disgust with me. It was a serious low point. The darkness I had left behind in my recovery came rushing back. It wasn't just that the family had turned their backs on me. I had always been the black sheep of the family. I was the one who was sent away so I wouldn't embarrass them when I was 14. I was the biggest disgrace in the family. Everyone else rose to the occasion. I always seemed to fail. What made this worse was that my nephew, the one person like me who had been a black sheep, had turned his back on me. I don't believe he meant to do that. However, he hasn't reached out to me since he admitted he had told my secret. Still, while I was back in the depths of depression, I wasn't defeated. I still had my sobriety. That my family couldn't take away from me. But I questioned if I could share this with my sponsees or my group. I had reached a level of respect and responsibility in the Zoom rooms. What would happen if I admitted to being extremely depressed and suicidal again? What would happen if I admitted I was still the damaged child and not the strong leader I was showing the group? Of course, I wasn't fooling everyone like I thought I was. One of my brothers called me after a meeting and asked what was wrong. He could tell by my tone that something was bothering me. I explained what I was going through and how I was extremely depressed. He told me to take my own medicine and be honest with the group, tell them what happened and how I felt. It was then that I discovered the true beauty of the program. I didn't isolate. I turned to connection to help me. I turned to my sponsor, my sponsees, my brothers in the program. I shared what had happened with my special group of friends, and a miracle happened. I wasn't rejected. Rather, I was told how much my shares and my words had helped them. They told me how my continued sobriety was a motivation, an example to them. Suddenly, I was no longer thinking how bad a person I was. Instead, I was thinking of how great this program is and how great the people are in this program. I may be a dirtbag, but I'm one of the finest dirtbags you will ever meet, as one of my favorite brothers loves to say. My recovery has saved my marriage, my sense of self-worth, and most importantly, my outlook for the future. I no longer think about what I've given up, what I've lost, what I don't get to do anymore. I think of what I've gained instead. I don't have that constant voice telling me I'm not good enough. I don't feel unworthy of positive comments. I am sober today, just for today, but I have been sober for 300 consecutive 1 days of sobriety. I'm still an addict. I will always be an addict, but I have a program that allows me to be part of something greater than my addiction. I'm not what I used to be and do. As I like to say, I used to be a good man who did bad things. Now I don't do bad things anymore, and all that's left is the good man I always wanted to be. Thank you all for being there when I needed a hand, for letting me offer you a hand when you needed one, and being a part of this incredible program. I came into this room nearly 12 months ago as a broken spirit, unable to look himself in the mirror or face the truth of all he had done. Now I walk prouder. I have confidence in my recovery. And most importantly, I have faith that if I start to slip, this program will provide me with the hand I need so I won't fall. Thank you all for listening and for offering me that hand when I needed it. And I almost cried again.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's a happy story, but I cried.
It is. It's showing the emotion. I get choked up on some of the things that I have to read when I did my second formal first step. I'm used to speaking. I have given my first step and have been in the program for several years. And yet I'm reading this and tears are coming. And yeah, it's beautiful to be able to show our emotions instead of just walling everything off and covering it up by acting out.
Well, thank you for letting me do that. I felt like from the culmination of my first step with your show to the culmination of my first year, it was appropriate to do it here.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been an amazing journey. It took me, I think, maybe 4 years to get through all of my 12 steps. So
you're not an overachiever, I guess.
yeah. And so it's been amazing to see the growth in you. And yeah, I similarly have difficulties just knowing the internal feelings that I have against myself and hearing positive feedback from others and how difficult that is to accept that you're hearing that from your other fellows, and just the amount of service that you've done for the noon groups and continue to do. And we talked a little bit about this on episode 100, and this was right when your internet was cutting out.
Yes.
But yeah, I remember you did manage to come back in at one point talking about how you've been able to take over some of the responsibilities that David has been doing for the meetings, and how incredibly awesome that is in terms of the service work.
Yeah, the service, you don't realize it till you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different game when you're on the other side. And it's not, I mean, sure, we're just reading the readings and calling on people, but it's different. And I gained so much from leading meetings and being a tech host, which is completely behind the scenes, just putting up the things, or actually being the secretary in two meetings. I do it in both groups I attend, and taking on even more trusted roles now. It just builds my confidence in myself, which had, if you'd asked me a year ago if I'd ever lead a meeting, I would have said no. And after I gave my first step, I was about 10 minutes into the affirmations afterwards that I was ready to just throw the computer at the wall and run away. I wanted to hide in shame again. And it was like, everyone's saying nice things about me. Why do I feel this way? I mean, it's just, I am a walking billboard for 12-step programs right now, because I am a totally different person. My wife tells me I'm a totally different person. My stepdaughter, who doesn't really know a lot about what I'm going through, has made comments about how I'm so much nicer to be around. It's just amazing. And it's all because I can pick up the phone and talk to people and get help when I need it, instead of holding on to it. I used to be an explosive anger person. I could not let out little bursts. I held. And then when it finally, I boiled over. Boom. Yeah. And I haven't had that happen to me. And I don't remember the last time I got that upset about something. And I mean, the people I've met, you, David P. I could go for an hour talking about people who have been hugely important in my life that I'll probably never meet in person. But I will call them on the phone and they will drop what they're doing and talk to me because they know I'm in trouble. And that is just amazing feeling. I can tell y'all things I can't tell my best friend I've had since I was 4.
I gave a little chuckle when you were reading, talking about joining the Charleston group on Zoom, and how it would just
I chose them because I don't know anybody in Charleston.
A lot of the meetings on Zoom can be localized if they keep the Zoom information private. We have a lot of, out of all the Bay Area meetings that we have, a lot of our stuff isn't public. So the Zoom information isn't readily available on the main SAA website. And so the meetings tend to stay a little bit more localized. So the same group of guys that were at the meeting before the pandemic still show up on Zoom together, and it's basically the same group of people. And
you need to break that down, in my opinion, because I know, I remember my biggest fear coming into this program was there was no long-term sobriety in the first group I went to, SA, which is totally wrong for me, but it's all we get in the Bible Belt of Memphis, Tennessee. And there was no sobriety in that group. When I hit my 2-month anniversary, I had the longest sobriety outside of my sponsor. 2 months. And then the Charleston group had a couple of guys over a year, but not many. And they're like, oh, there's tons of guys with long-term sobriety, but they don't come here. We need those. We need the guys with long-term sobriety in the meetings where the newcomers are coming. Because they give you hope for long-term. I found a group here in Memphis, my third group, SLAA. So now I've covered everything for your podcast. But the local, I meet every Monday morning, 6:30 in the morning. I have to drive to this place, but I am still the third youngest guy sobriety-wise in the group. And there are 2 guys with over 20 years, many guys with 10 to 20. And, that was a lifeblood for me too, because it does work long term. And you don't get that in a lot of the Zoom meetings, because the long termers have gone back to meeting face to face in their small groups, and they've left the young guys in the Zoom. And so if you get a chance to talk to some of those older guys, please invite them to come by occasionally and just say, 15 years, want y'all to know it's possible. Because it would be a huge impact for the youngsters and the newcomers. Not youngsters. I'm not young, but I was a newcomer. And knowing that long-term sobriety is not just a goal, but an achievable goal is hugely important.
Yeah, the SAA and COSA speaker meeting this past weekend, both speakers had been in SAA and COSA for over 30 years. And I can't wait to share those stories on the podcast. But yeah, 30 years plus of sobriety is an amazing journey of what it was like before and what it's like after, and the service
I'd like
work
to
that,
live long enough to
yeah.
have 30 years of sobriety.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, what I was going to say earlier about the noon rooms, and I've talked about it here on the podcast and in the rooms, how that was originally a Santa Clara meeting, and that we had Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is the Santa Clara group. And when we decided to do Tuesday and Thursday, that was posted on the main SAA website, and we started getting more people from around the country and eventually around the world. But we still only let them know about the Tuesday and Thursday meetings, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday still remained our closed circuit of friends that were originally at the in person. And then we started saying, hey, I've seen you at the Tuesday and Thursday. We'll let you know. Yeah, we're here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday also. And then eventually opening it up to the weekend. But seeing the international community on that is just way beyond anything that I had ever imagined that small little Zoom meeting could be. And now it's huge. So
Well, it's like I say, we're in a growth industry. We
yeah,
got more people coming in than we have people with long-term sobriety. It's very tough. We need to have more sponsors. We need more people to do the steps so they can help others do the steps.
yeah. One of the things that we did at that point is a lot of the people that were going to that group, we started a group called Extensions of Hope. And the original Santa Clara meeting was at the Hope Lutheran Church, and that's why we carried the name Hope over. But a lot of people that were going to the noon group at that time in the end of 2020, we said in January 2021, we're going to be doing 12 steps in 12 months. And so we were trying to get as many people through the steps in a group to have them to be available for sponsors. And a lot of those people are still in the noon group as it is today. But yeah, I think getting more people through the steps in a timely manner is important. And yeah, the vacuum that you talked about, opening yourself up to be a sponsor, all of a sudden that a whole bunch of people
blew me away.
Yeah. So yeah, it is important to limit yourself into what you think you can take on. Yeah, I do about 3 full-time sponsees and a couple of temporary sponsees.
And
And
work a full-time job and
yeah,
have a podcast.
yeah. But yeah, I remember doing like 5 full-time sponsees, and it was just too much for me to handle. And it sucks having
It's
to
hard to say no. That's what
yeah,
the problem is.
yeah.
I surprised. I'm an addict who has a hard time saying no. I know that's hard to believe, but I've learned I took on too many after my second round. I ended up with 5 full time, and I was like, okay, here we have our weekly meeting. What did we talk about last time? Which one are you? That's not really encouraging to the sponsee. And so I'm telling them, I'm like, look, I'm sorry, I overdid it. We're going to get through it. I'm going to work. Just got to remind me where we're at and I got to take better notes than I usually do, but it can be done. It's just not I think 2 is a perfect number for me because I can keep all the particulars together and just feel like when someone's begging, I can't say no, and I need to learn to say no.
Like LJ being able to take on a whole bunch of sponsees, but he at the time was unemployed and had just a lot of time on his hands, and he had a great file system and kept like the folders for each of his sponsees and just elaborate notes and checklists and all sorts of different things. while he was able to do that, that was just an amazing gift. And I know he's since gone back to work and has had to limit how much he is able to do in terms of recovery coaching and sponsoring and stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I have 5 sponsors is because LJ going back to work.
Yeah.
Phone call from LJ. He does not take no well. Mm-hmm. But anyway, listen, I appreciate, Jason, you having me on again. Hopefully this won't be episode 169.
No. Yeah, it will be 103. So
okay. Well, thank you so much. I hope I haven't bored anybody too much. And if you're listening to this with long-term sobriety, please make yourself available. We have so many people that have come out during COVID to get really realize how bad their addiction is, and we need sponsors bad.
Yeah. I know there are some fantastic meetings in the Bay Area, especially in San Francisco, where guys have been in the program for 25, 30, 35 years and have that amount of sobriety and have sponsored a lot of people. But I don't know how wide range of
There are not many meetings in Memphis, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So I would love to see some of those faces pop up in our noon Zoom meetings and other meetings across the country. Before closing out, this one of the things I love is just be able to find a Zoom meeting and join. It's just so weird how I can randomly be at a meeting. I've spoken at meetings in Chicago, New York, Scotland, and just having that ability to reach out to different communities. And there are times when I need a meeting and it's not my regular meeting time, but so, I can jump on a meeting here. And it's been an incredible gift of the pandemic problem, but it really led to the rise of Zoom meetings and availability for other people.
Thank God, I would have been lost.
Yeah.
Honestly, if it wasn't for Zoom, I was not staying in that SA meeting. First of all, they believed everything was just lust. There was nothing else.
It's a different focus.
The only sexual program that is accepted is heterosexual marriage.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm a heterosexual, but marriage is not the only time to have sex, in my opinion. And just because you are homosexual does not mean you're deviant. You can be a very healthy sexual homosexual.
Yeah.
You can be a totally sick married heterosexual.
Yeah.
And that was my big hang up with SA. So
yeah.
I like SLAA. I like SAA. And I identify best with SAA. It's just where I feel at home.
Yeah, me too. And not to disparage any of the other programs, there is a certain fit for each type of person. And this luckily was my first and only. I found home right away. But
lucky.
Yeah. And I still plan on doing an episode on the multiple S fellowships and having people from.
You got an expert here.
Yeah. I've got a couple of guys who still continue to do 2 or 3 programs and interchangeably. So I would really love to get that message out. This is an SAA podcast, so we definitely focus more on SAA, but I do want to acknowledge that those other programs are out there, and SCA, which we don't talk about a lot, and Sexual Compulsives Anonymous, and just lately PAA, Porn Addicts Anonymous. I don't know much about that program. It's a relatively young program. And so there are different 12-step groups addressing different focuses. So
for me, if you're addicted to any form of sex, you're a brother. It's just my addiction was for pornography and masturbation. My sponsor, who I loved, our obsessions were different in every way. We are totally different people in every respect. Yet he was perfect for me. He was the ideal sponsor who forced me to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
When I was like, can I pass this week? No, you cannot pass this week.
Yeah.
What have you got done? He was, and I love that because he made sure I worked the program.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, if you don't want to work it, I'll fire you right now. We don't have to talk. And it's like, no, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you need to worry about the differences. What you need to focus on is the hands are coming for your help.
Mm-hmm.
And take the hands when they're offered.
Exactly.
And as the beautiful line that was told to me, and I've repeated it and never credited the person who told me because I'm that way, but is every time you tell yourself, I don't want to make a call, you have to make a call. Because that's your addict talking to you. And if your addict's got that much of your ear, you need to hear someone else talking. And it's saved me so many times. Unfortunately, I work by using the phone. And a lot of times I'll sit there and go, I don't want to call this client. Oh, no. Now I got to make a program call and call the client.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm sticking to that. Whenever I say I don't want to make a call, I have to make a call because that's my addict talking to me.
Yeah.
And you gotta keep your conversations going. Don't let him whisper without you knowing what he's doing.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it's something that I read on episode 102, which I just put out today, finally. But a comment that we got on YouTube, just someone just blasting the program. And do you really expect to give your phone number to a bunch of sex addicts and that's going to help? And I said exactly why it helps. And it's the connection that we have with other addicts that really helps pull us out of the funk that we're in. And so
the opposite of addiction is not health. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Exactly.
And that's I hate platitudes, and it seems like that's all I say these days, but that one's very true. If you don't want to make a call, you probably need to make a call. And if you think you're going to get something out of a call, you're missing the purpose of the call. It's not what you get out of it. It's what you're allowing someone else to give you that's important. And as I tell people, please call me, because every time I get a program call, I get to recommit to my sobriety, recommit to my program. It makes me stronger in recovery when people call me. And that's why I will call everybody, because I make 3 calls a day still. Awesome. And no matter how many incoming I get, I make 3 outgoing, because I got to keep the addict from talking in my ear.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah.
I know I sound lousy on tape, but I have a much better voice in person. I will talk to you tomorrow, probably.
All right. I look forward to seeing you. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chip.
Bye-bye.
Many thanks to Chip for another wonderful share here on the podcast. I'm so grateful for his service at the Zoom meetings and as a friend of the pod as well. I did have a few emails and YouTube comments that I plan to share this week, but I will save them for the next few episodes since I have less time to record and edit this week. Like many others, my son is just getting back to school this week, and I'm actually taking him to see a live stream of a Metallica concert in a movie theater on Friday. Back in 2010, I remember taking my brother to see a live stream of the Big Four concert from Sofia, Bulgaria, and the Big Four being Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. And that was a lot of fun. So it should be really fun taking my son to see Metallica in the theater, since they don't have any current Bay Area dates. Anyway, the next few episodes will be from the SAA and COSA speaker meeting, and a little bit later we'll also be recording the last part of our tradition study. And I will have time to read a few of the listener emails on those episodes. So if you did wish to provide feedback for the podcast, you can email us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, or if you wanted to get a hold of me personally to ask any questions or arrange to be a guest on a future episode of the podcast, you can email me directly at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.